Chapter 1 of An Idler in the Wilds by Tickner Edwardes. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. An Idler in the Wilds by Tickner Edwardes. In the home of the Sedge-Warbler. The river flows deep through its jungle of reeds. From the cool shade of the willows on the bank, you get only a glimpse of it now and then, when the faint, slow wind of the summer noon parts the green thicket for a moment, and shows you the sun-spangled floor of the waters gliding noiselessly by. And with the noon has come the midday sloth and silence upon everything. All is quiet at last in the wood behind. The blackbird has laid down his flute, and the thrush is done with his piping. Only the sedge-bird lingers on by the waterside, in the stillness of the torrid day, fretting the sunlight with his peevish note. Wherever the green reeds grow thick and tall, there you are sure to find the sedge-warbler and his complaining song. But you cannot see him now, and, unless he chooses to declare himself, may never see him, peer as intently as you will. His is only a voice out of the silence. He hides in the dense reed cover, flitting restlessly from stem to stem, and keeping up his rich, low, chiding melody as he goes. Only when he flies straight across the open stream can you get a sight of the little grey-brown songster, and then, in a moment, he is lost to view again, and the quick staccato of his music breaks out from a new vantage point, more richly, more querulously than ever. He seems always out of humour with the hot sunshine. The brighter and stiller the day, the more complainingly he sings. But it is only like a great prima donna scolding at her maid. Not all the wayward fretfulness of the moment can hide the invincible beauty of her tone. And the sedge-warbler is an artist, too, great enough in his way. In the north they call him the Irish nightingale, but if you speak of the English mockbird here in southern Sussex, everyone will know the bird you mean. Listen to him now as he works invisibly to and fro in the waving green cover. There is his own fretful girding note continuously pouring out into the hot still air, but every minute or two he passes, without a break, into quite an alien melody. Now it is a song of the housetop, the quiet, deep, chuckling chorus of the swallow, as he sits among the grey-gold lichens of some cottage roof tree, chanting the sundown into its western bed. Now it is the warble of a thrush, wonderfully imitated, with its crystal diminuendo changing in a moment to the quick, harsh chirping of the sparrow, then back once more into the bird's own violent, chiding strain. And while you are still marvelling over these capricious changes, suddenly a note comes out of the thicket which you have always listened for, high up in the sunny blue overhead. It is the Skylark's song. Trills, crescendos, Kentish bellfires, all complete. But even as you press silently forward for a nearer place in your leafy concert hall, it breaks off as unexpectedly as it began. The prima donna is scolding her tiring woman again with a more furious sweetness than ever. You feel that it is all out of tune with the hot sunshine and the rich slothful murmur of the river deep in its cleft of green. The blackbird had an apter music when he sat in the oak spray, his golden dagger of a bill agleam in the shadows, singing tenor to the rippling soprano of the thrush. Even the little ox-eye, slowly clashing his silver cymbals up in the topmost branches, gave more to the burning light and greenery than this care-ridden songster, grudging his scant half measure of music to the summer's day. But you cannot dwell long in the midst of wild nature without recognising how much of art underlies it all. The dreaming light, the surfeit of colour, and the silence that is really nothing but dim sound, would all end in monotony if there were no contrasts to set off its squandered fragrance and unceasing pageantry of beautiful things. And so the little Sedge-Warbler is destined to sit in the reed brake, for ever girding at the sunshine and tempering the hot sweet noontide with its litany of care. Though the sedge-bird's favourite haunt is always the thick reed jungle, he never seems to make his home there. A kind of vanity of self-abasement, as human-like as all his other qualities, appears to drive him to choose the lowliest spots for his bed. Amidst the ivy on the willow stoles, or in the long grass under the river bank, he weaves together the dry bents and sedges that loosely form his nest. If you look for it, you may never find it, so cunningly is it ambushed. But the sedge-bird's mate, less careful than himself, will invariably betray its situation if you chance that way. Threading your path over the saggy ground where the willows grow, between the bank and the green reed cover, a sudden grating note strikes upon the ear, and out from her hiding place the sitting bird tumbles, rending the air with her harsh strident note. If she had kept quiet you would have passed on in another moment, never guessing that you had been so near to the coveted treasure. But fear, as it often does, has brought about the very disaster she would have prevented. All her ingrained caution vanishes. She flutters in and out of the place, never stopping her quick alarm note. Then a little method seems to join with her madness, but all too late. Having marked the spot for you indubitably, now she tries to cajole you from it. She flies from bush to bush, and as you follow, goes on farther still. But she always ends by doing the wrong thing again in the old pathetically simple way, going back in one straight, low-pitched flight to her bower, and breaking out at once into her garrulous minstrelsy with less of caution than ever. To these calm waters of sunshine and silence there comes another bird with the earliest summer days. A little larger than the sedge-chat, and with his plumage of a brighter brown, the reed warbler strikes you at once as one of the wildest and shyest of birds. Where the river journeys on beneath drooping arches of woodland, you will see little of him. You must take boat and follow the stream down to the alluvial plains, and there, in the treeless solitudes of pasture, where the green reed margin of the waters is higher and denser than ever, you will presently hear his incessant jarring note. He is no musician, the reed warbler. His song, though far gentler than the sedge bird's, has none of its richness nor any of its borrowed strains. It is a mere hurried, tuneless crrr, drifting out of the whispering gloom of the thicket, and blending oddly with the ripple of the water through its myriad stems. And yet there is an inexplicable pleasure in the note. It is as if the furnace-like glow of the summer noon were being translated into its equivalent in sound. And for the first time another sense could take in the full meaning of the sunbeams pouring down from the glittering blue vault above. Here on the plains there is solitude enough for the wildest of creatures, and far and near the little reed-warbler's voice rises into the tremulous, sultry air. He is famous among bird-lovers all the world over. But it is not his dry circadian melody that has won him this repute. Turn the prow of your boat into the murmuring green fastness, just where you heard him piping a moment back. The reeds divide with a hissing sound. Before the momentum of your boat has ceased, they have closed up behind you, and you are in a dim emerald grotto, with the turquoise of the sky for a roofing, and the charging sparkle of the waters below. Looking carefully round, at last you spy the object of your scrutiny. Far up in the rustling walls of your abiding place hangs the reed bird's wonderful cradle, delicately woven round 3 or 4 of the slender stems. It is safe above the highest flood mark, and deep fashioned, so that the roughest winds may not eject its treasure of mottled egg or callow young. With every breeze it rocks gaily to and fro, its very frailty of anchorage proving its chiefest safeguard. Unthinkingly you raise your hand. A touch of the fingers would bring it down and add it as a gem to your collection. But there is something in its sheer daintiness and fairy-like beauty that stays your grasp, even as you set it trembling on its airy scaffold. You give over your first rude impulse as a sacrilege. A moment more, and you have backed your boat out into the shimmering highway of the waters, and are pulling steadily homeward against the tide. End of chapter 1. Chapter 2 of An Idler in the Wilds by Tickner Edwardes. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The Flight of the Swift. When, in the enduring heat of summer, the hay has been carried and the shorn meadows lie in pallid green under the rich sunset dark of the trees, the screaming swift seems to come suddenly into importance. Cuckoo and nightingale are gone, or silent. Love song and nesting lullaby have given way to the eternal twittering of the young birds in the hedgerows and woods. But the lordly swift seems mightier of wing and voice than ever, and the evening silence that has gathered now over field and woodland serves but to throw his wild aerial music into stronger, stranger relief. The long summer day is ending as it began, hot and stifling and breathless to the last amber lees of its molten cup. Eastward the deep night sky is lifting, and lighting the stars up one by one, and the crooked sickle of the moon stands out suddenly near and water bright. Yet the swifts never stop in their mad race to and fro under the darkening heaven. louder and shriller grows their wild chorus. In twos and threes, in whole battalions, they sweep by overhead, wheeling, eddying, swerving hither and thither, when every other feathered thing has gone to roost, and only the wary bats are out to keep them twilight company. There is a mystery in this nightly frolic of the swift that baffles alike imagination and conjecture. The mad excitement of it all is beyond a doubt, yet the fierce, tumultuous note is not a battle cry. No one who has watched this stalwart brotherhood at their work in the deepening sunset light can fail to mark the utter absence of contention among them. Rivalry there is in every movement, but it is that of soldiers storming a breach. Intense competition, side by side, with perfect unanimity of purpose. It is no war challenge, this piercing note of the swifts, whirling past in the dim, soft light, now dark against the vaporous saffron of the western sky, now like a flight of golden arrows as they swing up into the still air and catch the last yellow glances of the day on their flickering scythe-shaped wings. But now, as a great company of them dips together, taking the whole circle of the valley in one lightning sweep, a clue comes in the dilemma. As they speed by, scarce a dozen feet overhead, something strangely familiar rings in their joyous clamour and the rushing sound of their flight. To the mind's eye flashes a vision. A winter picture of hounds in full cry and the scarlet of the hunt behind. A picture of deep, jubilant pleasure in all the fierce colour and movement and ding-dong fury of the chase. It is a hunt, this mad, merry race of the swifts at eventide. The shrill scream is their view hallo, their hunting chorus. The primeval instinct of all creatures for the chase is on them too, and, like the foxhounds, they give voice to their exultation as they stream headlong by. The day is all but gone. The blue night wins its way from star to star. Now the moon has a silvery counterpoise to every faint glimmer of gold still abiding in the topmost branches of the trees. Yet the swifts are mounting higher and higher. The life of the summer day is over for them, but another life is only just beginning, their wonderful night life in the trackless region of the upper skies. Still watching them intently, you can see that a change is coming over their berserk gambols. They no longer speed their jingling carriole to and fro. Keeping more compactly together now, they climb steadily upward into the sweet hot dusk, their free, joyful pealing note getting fainter and softer as they rise. The moments pass. Straining eyes and ears, you can only just make them out now. A little dark cloud against the bluer darkness and the silver of the flinching stars. You all but miss the lilt of their quiet song, joyous still, yet far away as memories of music half a lifetime old. Another instant and the dim grey blotch has vanished. The song is gone. Sight and hearing tire and fail together, and willingly droop to earth again. You look about you wonderingly. While you are gazing, the night seems to have fallen suddenly upon everything. The glowworm has hung her glittering love lamp in the hedgerow, and the fern owls have begun their churring tremolo in the deep oak wood behind. Never a year goes by but some old folk saying, some country superstition about birds and their doings is verified, or at least its error cleared away from the underlying germ of truth by modern thought and observation. This mysterious nocturnal flight of the swift has long given an uncanny tincture to his reputation among country dwellers, and most of all with those whose business keeps them abroad at all hours of the day or night. Shepherds will tell you that the devil swallow, as he is known amongst them, never sleeps and never rests. He hawks the whole night through, they say, up there in the farthermost reaches of the summer night. Daybreak, indeed, will see him down again after the low-flying insects, but the earliest heat of noon reclaims him once more for the heights. He is up there in the blue, it is averred, so far above that no human eye can follow him, searching the ultimate air and sunshine for the winged essence that gives him perpetual vigour and life, until the declining day lures him down once more for a little space to seek the more earthly food with which he leavens his long banquet of ambrosia. But modern bird lore, while ceding the swift his hegemony of the night, denies him much of this old Promethean reputation. The truth is that he is no celestial fire stealer, no lover of the sweltering heat of noon. He is, of all things, a bird of the golden mean of summer weather, and if, when the sun is nearing its zenith, he no longer weaves his mazy pattern on the glowing sky, it is no moth-like ambition to be nearer the sun's caresses that renders him invisible. If, on any hot summer's morning, you watch by the old church tower, where, from time immemorial, he has made his home, you will soon see the way of it. Long before the first chill wave of the dawn began to quench the starshine, his eager cry startled the darkness overhead. He sang the morning up, silver grey, golden grey, rose grey, through to rippling flamboyant crimson, and the final bravery of sunglow kindling 1,000 beacon fires from hill to hill. To and fro in the strengthening light he came and went. The day got up in its first young might, laughing over the dewdrops to see itself so fair. All through the ripe, rich morning the swift's glad monotony of music filled the air about the old church steeple, as he lanced to and fro between the populous sunlight and the twittering brood within. But now the last dew spangles are gone from the shadiest nook of the meadow. White hot the summer sun beats down on the flagging greenery and the parched dusty plains. All the grey hills are jigging in the tremulous azure, and the swifts are coming home at last for their midday rest. One by one they circle downward to their eyries, alighting at full speed with a clear sharp impact on the crumbling stone, and none come forth again. In the cool dark of the belfry loft, where the wind is for ever sighing through the ancient jalousies, the swift and his lifelong mate doze away the torrid heat of noon with their tweeting youngsters round them. A dozen pairs or more have built in the dusty precincts of the church tower for years unnumbered, heedless of the swing of the great bronze bell that sets every timber groaning, or the chime that has been their cradle song, and may some day prove their requiem. This is the real abiding place of the sturdy devilling when the day has got into its loftiest, fiercest stride. But with the first mild breath of evening, when the reddening sun strikes up through the lattice, barring with gypsy gold the cobwebs overhead, the whole colony will be up and out again, replenished of wing and voice for the sunset chase and the witchery of the coming starlight revel. But if the swift is transcendently a bird of the calm evening skies, he is none the less a striking figure in every phase of summer weather. In rain or shine, heydays or grey days, he seems as eager and often as vociferous a huntsman as ever. The flight of the swift has long been a major factor in the predictions of the rustic meteorologist, but it is difficult to see how his repute as a worldly wiseman has arisen. For, to the latter-day observer of his habits, the swift would appear to do nothing invariably. In the chilly, silent, windless days, when not a leaf in the hilltop woodland stirs, nor a blade of meadow grass quivers, and the sombre sky droops overhead, with the white porthole of the sun gleaming in it, rayless and cold, he is sometimes a clamorous intruder on the higher stillness, and sometimes a sullen furtive flitter, mutely examining the plains below. On boisterous sunny mornings his ways are even more capricious. Either he flings himself madly into the uppermost frolic of wind and sunshine, or he is nowhere to be seen, and the larks and the house martins have the whole bright scurrying sweep of the heaven to their own devices. Even in the hottest, stillest noons of summer, single swifts will keep persistently abroad, searching the torrid air at every altitude, reckless of heat and tribal precedent alike. But in one tremendous aspect of the season, the devilling would seem to follow an invariable impulse. When the great ragged storm cloud comes stretching over the blue, the flying prison house of a myriad sulphurous fires and deep contending voices, and the wind swells in a moment from a faint, uncertain breath to a screaming hurricane, the tocsin of this fantastic clan peals out, and from far and near he gathers to the summons. The first slow raindrops spatter on the dust-grimed leaves. The blue glittering forerunner of the tempest zigzags through the sky, with the deep challenge of the thunder hurtling after it. High up against the sooty murk of the storm, the swifts are congregating, hundreds now, where none were evident before, wheeling in and out in a stately dance, their own wild melody joining bar for bar with the hoarser music of the hurricane. Now the clatter of the rain grows faster and more furious. With a rush and a roar the torrent comes dragging over the hill. The grey earth-line swamps out and vanishes. The floodgates of the sky give way, and every other sound is overcome with the deafening impact of the falling water. It is a lost world now, a chaos of descending ocean, with the cruel green armoury of the tempest leaping continuously from dark to dark. And far above, in the thick, the forefront of it all, the swifts are whirling in and out 1,000 strong, revelling in the strife of fire and water, caring no more for the deluge than they would for the lightest dewdrop shed from a summer rose. Of such heroic fashioning is the lordly devil swallow. End of chapter 2. Chapter 3 of An Idler in the Wilds by Tickner Edwardes. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The Hour of the Tide. Tarrock Bay faced south by east, and the rose-red light of summer morning ever won its first bright fingerhold here, where the great rocks went tumbling down far into the mist engarlanded sea. Thus early, if the day were to be fine, shore and waves alike were often hidden under the same briny mystery, fold upon fold of sere white gossamer drifting idly by in the van of the scarce perceptible breeze. Yet high above, all round the vast amphitheatre of the bay, the broken rim of the cliff stood up clear against the sky, flushed with the rosy tincture of the morning, sharp cut like a diadem of coral against the awakening blue. Then the sea below was as yet only a voice out of the dim obscurity, a wandering complaint whispered along the shelving shore, but hurtling up into the silence like the twang of a harp string, where east and west the rocks lay out almost to the farthest limit of the receding tide. Nowhere else in the whole fair stretch of southern coastline were there smoother, broader sands than in Tarrock Bay. Sloping gently up to the base of the cliff, they joined the rocky foothills lying close under the beetling heights, while in the lowest face of the precipice were innumerable caves, unfathomed hollows of darkness, worn by the waters of ages gone by, when the sea, with its unceasing onslaught of breakers, had hewn the bay out of the solid rock. But for generations now the highest tides had reached scarce midway up the yellow sand. All its inmost plains were dry and powdery, full of green marram grass, and in the loamy crevices of the foothills behind, every sea flower bloomed luxuriously in its season. Pink thrift and golden horn poppies, and the purple nightshade that loves the salt breath of ocean, even the wonderful sea eringo, like the grey-green holly, strung with thistle bells blue as the summer sky overhead. So completely had the earth here won back its old dominion from the waters, that the wildest tempest could do no more than beat out its white rage harmlessly on the shelving beach. But even in the quietest seasons, when the sea lay in one calm plain of slumberous azure to the dim horizon, and the faint ripples made no more sound than falling rose leaves as they spent themselves on the immutable sand, far to the east and west, where the grim rocks crowded down into the water, each peering through dun weed tresses witch-like over its fellow's shoulder. Here, in storm or calm, there was ever a deep unrest. The old feud still waged ceaselessly round these stubborn outposts. No day was so calm but a white spurt of foam would here and there rocket up into the sunbeams from some unwary ripple trapped in the scissor jaws of those grey crags. And in times of storm and stress there was always berserk conflict. Hoarse thunder pealing, an Etna of foam flinging sky high, whole clouds of glistening sea froth constantly stripped off by the wind and scattered over the level sand floor of the bay, when the air was full of these careering foam bells driving upon the face like heavy rain. Anon would come the real deluge out of the blue dark heaven, and then, taking shelter from the dual torrent in one of the many caves, the voice of the sea would follow hard upon your heels, roaring, reverberating, above, around, deep echoing in the Cimmerian gloom behind you, until it seemed as if the earth itself had roused again, kraken-like, from its primeval slumber, and the old tremendous issues were once more at stake. But it was in the fairest days of summer weather that Tarrock Bay was at its best. When, with the coming of August, the inland woods shut down into green cryptic labyrinths of silence, and the parched fields held no blither music than the chirp of a cicada, or rarely the yellowhammer's weary jingle out of the dusty brake. Life in Tarrock Bay seemed only quickened by the torrid sunbeams to a fuller, sweeter intensity. To the bird lover, the very title marked at once its quality and venerable estate. Now no ornithologist worth the name is unaware that the Tarrocks, the mottled restless element in every company of seagulls, are only the young of the kittiwake still in their first year's dress. But it was otherwise in the days when the longshoremen christened this solitary place. Then the Tarrock was accounted a distinct species, just as many an old-time bird snarer believes in grey linnets and blood linnets to this day. The herring gulls bred here in goodly numbers, side by side with the kittiwakes, but in August their nesting time was over, while the smaller, gentler gulls were still far from the end of family cares. Tarrock Bay was the immemorial stronghold of the kittiwakes. Every ledge and cranny in the perpendicular heights was marked with their lime-washed cradles, neater fashioned than with most of the careless tribe, but still mere clumsy bulks of grass and matted seaweed, often crowded together so that hardly an inch of space divided nest from nest. Here, year after year, they raised their clamorous progeny, and as soon as the young Tarrocks were strong enough of wing, led them fluttering and screaming down to the water's edge, to learn the sea craft of their kind, matchless almost in the whole annals of bird life essentially marine. To watch a flock of kittiwakes at work in Tarrock Bay of a breezy summer's morning was a pleasure to be come at only by dint of much perilous scrambling over the weed-grown barriers which flanked the bay at either end. Slippery work it was, and a scatheless passage hardly to be hoped for. But once this lonely ocean sanctuary was gained, the great boulders which strewed the foreshore everywhere gave ample cover for leisurely observation. The crying of the gulls went up into the sunny air like some wild rhythmic sea chant as the whole company worked slowly, steadily onward against the breeze. To number them seemed past all human effort. They formed a vast cloud of flickering pinions, dark when they rose against the sky, glittering white as winter stars when a sagging line of them stooped to the crested emerald of the sea. Nothing escaped their myriad-eyed scrutiny. Every wave and shimmering green water furrow was keenly reconnoitred. the birds spreading out in regular open order like gunners over a field. And time after time, when they had thus worked far out into the rough water to windward, suddenly, as at a given signal, the greater part of the flock would rise and stream back on the wings of the wind to their former starting point, and begin their steady, patient quartering of the waters over again. Often, and especially in boisterous weather, the herring gulls would join with the kittiwakes in these gargantuan hunting forays, mingling with them peaceably enough, and then it was curious to note the varying tactics of the two. The great herring gull, with its 4-foot stretch of wing, seemed clumsy, nervous, and slow, always at odds with the turbulent breeze. A palpable distrust of the water was upon him. When he spied some floating treasure, he hovered indecisively about it, stooping lower and lower, his long legs dangling inconsequently beneath. And when at last he seized the prize, the capture was made gingerly, without wetting a feather, and he was up again in a moment, looping along in his ponderous, apprehensive, elderly way in the track of his vociferating mates. But to the kittiwake all this riot of wind and sea and sunshine brought only a resistless exultation. The joyous triple note from which his name is coined pealed out unceasingly far and near, gliding and wheeling hither and thither, now volleying up into the gem-bright blue of the morning, now skimming low down in some yeasty trough of the deep. A wild gaiety seemed to urge him onward and fill him with a Viking delight of the sea. And when his keen eye marked the living silver wavering by through its green depths, his was no stealthy dubiousness of attack. Hovering an instant kestrel-like, he always made a sudden, resolute plunge downward at his prey, cleaving the water with the stroke of a battle mace, the white spray spurting up and hiding the whole bird for a moment, until he rose again with his long bright pinions held jubilantly above him, and the writhing quarry fast in his golden scimitar of a beak. These were the brave rollicking days of summer weather, when from dawn to dusk of evening the white sea chargers foamed and curvetted over the green, and the south west wind lulled its resounding music only with the coming of night. But there were other days, days of imperial calm, long, still, breathless days of August sunshine, when life in Tarrock Bay slowed down into a delicious pause of everything, when the very sun seemed to stand still in the burnished blue of heaven, and time himself to grow drowsy and fold his rainbow wings to rest under the compelling opiate of the light. One such day, of all others spent in this oblivious ocean Eden, abides in the memory. It was the mute, windless calm that so often follows a storm. The gale had blown itself to a standstill overnight. Above, the sky was intensely blue, washed bare by the deluge from horizon to earth, and the sunbeams poured down through the tense hot air like molten gold. Below, the sea lay in glassy stillness as far as the eye could fathom. Not a sound came out of the waters, and even the gulls, under the spell of the sunshine, had given over their eternal crying, and were afloat on the sapphire, fast asleep in the noonday glare. It was the hour of the tide, the hour when the water prints its last light footsteps on the sweltering sand, dwells for a little space inert, shimmering, voiceless, and then, by imperceptible degrees, begins to subside. The drowsy ripple music of the flood had died away. The change had come. And now the first glistening rim of wet sand began to show like a bridal ribbon along the shore. And with it, in a moment, the golden lethargy of the morning was shattered. A stir came in the sleeping multitude far out in the bay. One white wing lifted above the azure. The old bright busy note keened forth. Keep-we-way! Keep-we-way! Quickly now the sunshine filled with glancing pinions as the whole company winged its way lazily shoreward with shrill outcry, to search the new bared sands for stranded treasure, the living flotsam and jetsam of the vanished storm. End of chapter 3. Chapter 4 of An Idler in the Wilds by Tickner Edwardes. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The Song of the Skylark. What thou art, we know not. What is most like thee? From rainbow clouds these flow not, drops so bright to see, as from thy presence showers a rain of melody. If ever a complete history of birdsong comes to be written, not by the microscope-eyed field clubman who views nature merely as a vast mosaic of interesting items, but by some great, far-seeing genius, as human as he is great, we may then get some light thrown on one at least of the profounder mysteries of the countryside. The nightingale sings to cheer his sitting mate. The cuckoo calls his wandering womankind to him. When the stormcock peals from the topmost branch of the rowan tree in the angry glow of sunset, it is clearly exultation at the coming of wild weather that impels his clarion note. Love, or war, or pride of life, accounts for nearly every song of the hedgerow or green verge of woodland, and overweening summer has long since dulled and silenced motive and fleeting melody alike. But the skylark's song is not to be explained away on any such hypothesis. Like the poor, it is always with us, and, like the rain, it falls on the just as well as the unjust, and we know no more of the song-giver than that he ever seeks the great arena of the upper skies for his music-making. That he must needs soar and sing, be the winter's day ever so gloomy, or the furnace fires of summer parching the delivered earth, or milk-white dawns of autumn winning the grey hills one by one out of the dim star-garden of the night. The commonest things in nature are always the most beautiful. To link rarity with loveliness is but the human infraction of the wider theme. Water is everywhere, and colour, form and sound have their last word in the singing of the brooks, azure and jade of dreaming lake or foaming torrent, the complex lustre of the sea under the goad of winds that are themselves the bravest colour-bearers of all, and this rippling wonder music of the lark, accounted note by note through any year of wind and rain and sunshine, would outnumber the very sand grains of all the shores of time. How little, indeed, any other songster has to do with the sum of nature's music, year in and year out, must have been long since evident to the bird lover accustomed to the open air in all seasons. He who comes to the country first with April's green leaves, or the full flood tide of blossom in May, hears for the most part only the fair weather friends of the countryside. Thrush and nightingale and blackbird are busy enough then, and the ear is trained insensibly earthward, even when at every step the lark breaks from his dew-soaked cover in the meadow, and startles a momentary wonder with the rich joyousness of his springing fount of song. But a few fathoms upward, each new singer is lost like the others in the multitude thronging the blue. If for a while you try to follow him, sight and hearing soon tire in the dazzling sun-glow. There is something over-ascetic, well-nigh unreasonable, in this passion for altitudes, with such all-sufficing splendour rife below. For a moment you cannot but realise what a vast ocean of melody fills the pathless blue. But it is all too remote, too ultra-human, because too faultlessly joyous. And the nightingale soon begins anew her tender plaint in the thicket hard by, with a more winsome anguish than ever. Stylites of the silver cymbals is forgotten, up there on his pillar of sunshine, in the spell of the humbler, earthlier strain below. But the dwindling autumn days make the truth of the skylark's song supremacy clear at last. Standing here in the lee of the wood of a bright September morning, little diminution in the sum of nature's melody is at first apparent. The old sweet contention is abroad in the air, and the ancient jealousies of summer winds are yet alive in the bickering tree-tops. But ever and again a strange lull descends upon everything. Like a stone dropping, the lark comes down, carolling as he falls, until his wing touches the brown clod, and the song is quenched as the light from a burning torch cast into water. And then, of a sudden, the penurious autumn silence of wood and hedgerow stands revealed. Merry piper and flute player, light-hearted jingler of castanets, and shrill unnumbered choir of lesser voices. All the gay campanology of the woodland is over. The ringer's gone, or mute in the dusty thicket. And only the lark stays in the forsaken concert hall, singing his blithest to the empty branches, all the burden of the day upon him, as now again he lifts into the crisp morning sunshine to quicken heaven with his running fire of song. Yet here, in the close-set garden ground of country lanes, half the real significance of the skylark's music is lost, even though autumn has laid her hushing finger everywhere, and the voices of riverside and carvet are all but haunting memories. Wherever, indeed, a blade of grass grows, the vagrom minstrelsy of the lark, like joy articulate, follows the daily trend of every season's sun. But to know it in all its pristine quality, the wide untrammelled spaces of the earth must be sought. In the great horizons of the world, breezy down and desolate, sea-girt waste and wild, bare moorland, there alone the lark comes into his full inheritance of song. The heart of the southern Highlands, the rolling, wind-washed downs of Hampshire and Sussex, are places beyond all others to get the full import of his singing. In the green shade-encumbered valleys, the sky is never wide enough for him. We get only a detached, disjointed symphony. Sun and wind cannot bear and blend the music, winnowed so finely by the trees. But here on the Downs it has a widely different meaning. It is no longer a single intermittent voice. A whole nation of singers must be at large up there in the limitless span. There are no telltale pauses now, nor any sense of isolated effort. And halting a moment in your long, swinging stride over the turf to listen, it is impossible to believe there is not some ordered correspondence between the musicians, some plan of melody in which each takes subtle preconcerted part. On these first days of autumn, when the dew begins to lie late in shady meadow corners, and the night grows ever stronger and keener of wing, the failing season brings with it an inscrutable melancholy to all lowland scenes. But the Downs know none of the whimperous half-moods of nature's sere and yellow leaf. The changes from season to season are deep, but little evident superficially. In the nadir of the year, when in the valleys slumbering winter scarce stirs under the caress of the unshadowed midday sun, the Downs are all aeonian laughter at the mere touch of its lightest beam. On the plains spring winds its fairest garland through the hedgerows. Soon every April blossom comes to the downside, yet only in minute, sober replica, a far dim echo of the thronging life beneath. Even in the full flush of summer, life on the Sussex Downs goes temperately, a land where it is always pleasant afternoon, a haven of quiet breezes and flowing purple cloud shadows, of unending lark song and the soft thunderous note from distant browsing sheep. And windless autumn mornings bring rarer enchantments still to these southern highlands, washed in the sweet salt breath of the sea. The river mists are abroad in the valley, long clinging folds of white creeping stealthily round the foot of every hill. Up on the Downs only a soft haze fills the air, like a silken trammel net garnering the pallid sunshine and bringing the faint sky down within an arm stretch of the dewy turf beneath. Against the light the grass seems thickly paved with glistening water drops. Every stride through the long bents throws a shower of dewbells rustling and tinkling on the path ahead. As you go forward, a glittering halo hems you in. You walk on silver-beaded gossamer that breaks into 1,000 iridescent colours under the tread. In an hour the sun will have drained dry this brimming chalice of the morning. The gold will come back to the sunbeams, and the blue to the sky, and the freed air will gather the songsters once more out of the remotest emerald of the hills. But for once all sound is gone in the muffling vapours, all colour lost under the shrouding silver foil of autumn dew. It is a white world now, and a silent world, mute of music save for one quiet voice, ineffably sweet and far away and solitary, scarce more discernible than to eyes are stars in the midday blue. End of chapter 4. Chapter 5 of An Idler in the Wilds by Tickner Edwardes. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. A Woodland Pessimist. It was summer down in the meadow, and summer on the winding path that led to the wood. Sitting here at the foot of the great beech tree, you might have said that the season was at its very zenith of glory, so dense was the leaf canopy above you, so rich and gay the flash of the sunbeams on the old leaf carpet underfoot. Up there in the sunshine, the living leaves frolicked against the blue, and their dancing shadows fell on the dead brown leaves below, giving them a subtle illusion of movement. Everywhere beneath the verdant arches of the wood, the thick leaf carpeting seemed to rise and fall, as though the breeze blew under it and was lifting it softly, indolently, as waves lift on an ebbing summer sea. When the cushat flew out of the topmost branch of the beech tree with his noisy clatter of wings and bore away over the sunny meadow, he went as he had done 1,000 times before in sultry days of June, just the same leisurely swing through the same blue air and sunshine, the same veering, purposeless flight, looking about him as he went, as though the meadow-sweet still bloomed under the hedgerow, and the mayberries were yet green in their rustling tangle of thorns. And the little hedge chanter sang on in the lane below as garrulously as ever. The calendar told of autumn days begun, but his was no song of sere October. Brief and chatty and mildly bright, it seemed to chime in with the gold and green of the morning, more like a welcome song for advancing summer than the last gay notes of a season past its time. Listening to his winsome music and the soft soughing of the wind overhead, watching the play of the sunbeams to and fro over the moist brown earth, over the nodding heads of cranesbill, all the pinker for their dim environment, over the fringe of yellow hawkweed aglow on the brink of the wood, the clock of the year seemed to have turned back half its shining circle. Summer seemed to tread as valiantly through glowing wood and crimson garlanded meadow as ever it had done in bygone hours of June. The ringdove had ceased its crooning song high up in the dim wood labyrinth, and was gone to the ploughland over the hill. And now the little hedge chanter stopped short in his homely melody, and scurried away into the dense hazel cover. The reason of his sudden silence and still hastier flight was soon apparent. A quick rustling sound spread through the thicket, and where a long green bramble spray arched over the path, a robin crept out to warm himself in a golden loop of sunshine that swung to the woodland floor. He halted midway down the bramble branch and looked vigilantly about him. Strangely odd and strangely old he appeared, in his faded red gorget and shabby cloak of brown, as he glanced keenly from side to side, feigning not to mark the human intruder on his solitude. His mere coming had driven the small feathered interloper precipitately away. But this other exhibited no terror of him, and no disposition to stir from his mossy seat. The red eremite hopped down to the ground, and back to his well-worn perch again, visibly annoyed at the unmannerly observer's scrutiny. He waited a little, still hoping that he would be gone. At length He turned the unwelcome guest a chilly shoulder of dun-brown feathers, and still keeping up his pretence of ignorance at his presence, looked abstractedly away. The wind went on with its summer song in the tree tops. Out on the sun-flooded meadows the swallows lanced to and fro with their steel blue sheen. A missel thrush piped in the far-off holly. Every moment a lark swept up from the oat stubble near at hand, to join in the silver ripple of music above in the blue. Soft west wind and murmuring leaves, glad light and tireless singers, all joined in the one sworn brotherhood of make-believe against the calendar's relentless story of the waning days. But the redbreast harboured no such fine fatuities. He was the consistent wooer of truth, and loved her seemingly when least agreeable. Moping there in his single beam of sunlight, when the whole bright morning was at his beck and call, he had cleared the thicket around him of less conscientious musicians, but himself remained in dubious silence, mistrusting the common initiative to be merry, lacking the conviction to be entirely wise. At length his pessimistic mood seemed to grow too burdensome for purely mental vision. Soliloquy became to him an obvious necessity. Flirting his wings a little in shrugging concession to this new need, he tried over a bar or two of his most plaintive strain. It was non-committal, merely a staid reflection on the inconsequence of life in general. But the art of it was manifest. Clear and low it rang through the wood, and riveted attention instantly. And now, no longer spurning chance companionship, the little robin hermit turned him about and seemed to pour out his quaint recitative directly for his human hearer. At first the song came in brief disjointed phrases, with ruminative pauses in between. "You have had your fill of summer," it seemed to say. "Why seek to hold back a wearied guest? See, he has worn out his gala finery long ago. Why cling to his sorry rags of gold and purple, and vex him with your importunity? Surely he will go, and no less swiftly, for all your pains." The song changed from its quiet reflective measure to a sudden declamatory strain. What is there in all this lusty heat and brawling colour to wish for ever? The earth is sick of the sunshine, and longs for her winter rest. And winter is already here. You cannot see her yet, but along every hedgerow, if you will but listen, you can hear the sweep of her robe, the frou-frou of her sad black drapery, with the clink of the icicles in its train. When June roses were, that was the time for singing. But all this hectic flare of scarlet berry, what is it but rouge daubed on a wrinkled, worn-out face? The voice stopped. Out in the sunshine the west wind travelled the whole gay round of the meadow with a blither note than ever. The jibe stung the robin into his loftiest, sternest rhetoric. Fair face and hollow heart, that is your summer that lingers past its time. Hark to the wind now, the old silken courtier tiptoeing through the bushes, lest he should shake down the glittering gewgaws unawares. To-day he went to meet the lifting sun, all rosy smiles and soft caresses. 1,000 diamonds sparkled on his sandals, his glib, unthinking crew of roisterers carolling at his heels. But to-morrow he will have thrown down the smiling mask. He will come raging up with the sunshine, and drive it all day long before him. His thunder will be in every tree top, and his wild wolf's snarl on every hill. He will drown the world with his angry weeping. And then you will see all the crimson trumpery pelting into the sodden meadow grass, and the mummers hiding in frightened silence under the lashing leaves. A swift end then to all their merrymaking. Ay, vanity of vanities, and the vainest thing of all, this trust in a fickle western breeze. The song ceased. The little hermit bird sat a while in silence, thoughtfully preening his wings. When he began again, all the fire and fervour had gone from his music. It had been too venturesome a flight for one small singer, and he of great art but poor conviction. He harked back now to his old safe, sad-voiced, dubious strain. Hark to the revellers now! They know nothing, yet they go on singing. And, after all, who can say? 'Tis but a fool's heart that is ever rejoicing, yet wisdom has not always sorrow for yoke-fellow. The bird's heart of a season, the heart of a man through 80 years and 10, it is all the same. A day, a year, a lifetime, where is the difference? Each has its glamour of dawn, its ripe rich noon, its sombre setting. The night follows day, the winter follows summer, and death follows life. And one common darkness is the visible end of each. He made a telling pause, and then, in melodious afterthought, the compromise. Yet who shall say? Of a truth the days return, the summer blossoms shine again. And why not a second dawn for all the three? The quivering bell-like stanzas died away. The wind had freshened now. High above, where the green beech branches flaunted against the blue, it was stirring with a louder, freer note. And down through the emerald dusk, with leisurely glide and many hesitating spirals, came fulfilment of the robin's durnful warning, the first new autumn leaf. Turning, pirouetting, yet ever downwards through the green silence. At last it fell to earth and rested there, a shining brown gold fleck of light on the old dun carpeting of last year's leaves. Here was confirmation of the robin's winter prophecy. But he did not see it. The bramble branch was slowly waving to and fro in its golden skein of sunshine, but the perch was empty. The red anchorite was gone to his cell for noontide meditation, and already the little hedge chanter was back in the thicket, singing his old undaunted song of summer days. End of chapter 5. Chapter 6 of An Idler in the Wilds by Tickner Edwardes. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Red November. The south wind fills the autumn blue with flecks of cloud, soft evanescent forms for ever changing and dissolving under the dual touch of sun and breeze. Now and again a wisp of white cirrus strays over the face of the sun and dims its glory for a moment. But the grey shadow soon journeys by. The yellow sunlight comes racing back over the meadow, and the smouldering woods burst once more into flame of amber and russet and gold. On upland and lowland, the autumn morning rocks and sways and glitters again as blithely, as bewilderingly as ever. But as yet the red ruin of wood and forest, the menace of winter in falling leaf and stripping branches, is only for the highlands and the wind-swept slopes. Here by the river, scarce a sign of the failing season shows among the green. Forget the burning, warning light on distant hills. Look only at the swaying labyrinth of reed tops, the untarnished green of riverside oak and ash, the leafy tangle of underwood, and it might be the August sunshine that lies like cloth of gold on the dreaming waters, and lights up the vivid blue of the kingfisher as he hurtles by to his fishing ground beyond the weir. Out on the upland, for all its warmth and cheery touch, the wind has the searching, tingling quality of autumn in every breath. Here by the river, its rollicking power is all but gone. Its voice is only an undertone, a wayward song in the tree tops, half hushed in the deeper song from the river bed. The tide has turned. Strong and steady and sure the brimming waters sweep by under their paving of sun gold, every ripple bearing its burden of fallen leaves down to the far off sea. While the tide held, the illusion of summer was almost complete. Above, the gay deceit of the sunshine, the rich unsullied verdure of the trees, the blue of the sky as full of lark song as any morning in June. Below, the tangle of briar at the water's edge hid all but the green summits of the quivering reeds. Trailing their fingertips in the flood, the drooping oak branches made cool brown shadows on the gold, where the blackbirds came to drink as thirstily as ever. The gossamer nets drifted by in the gentle air, nets that caught the sunbeams and bore them gleaming into every shadowy nook beneath the trees. And every bush was outlined with a haze of light on countless insect wings. If a nightingale had trilled in the dense cover yonder, it would not have come unmeetily, so bright, so mild was the generous autumn day. But the tide has turned at last. The leaves, the tell-tale leaves, go hurrying by on the descending waters, and in a moment the gay conspiracy of the sunshine is betrayed. Through the treeless plains the tide came up, bearing only the sunbeams and the azure mirrored on its bosom, an inverted picture of the upper skies, all the fairer for the ripple and stir of life it drew from the river bed. But now the sun's bright tenancy is done, the mirror is broken. From bank to bank the returning stream is dark with the fallen leaves, gathered from 1,000 upland woods that wrestle ceaselessly in the grip of the unruly wind. Rich yellow from the elms, and red from the beeches, and slender flecks of willow gold, all whirling by in a gleaming sodden company, and telling the tale of the unavailing light and ever shortening days. The tide falls. Slowly the grey reed stems lift out of their diminishing waters. Now the sunken snag in mid-stream begins to rear its weed-crowned head, and the leaves gather behind it in a dense pack of glistening colour, and a wedge-shaped space of open water shows in front, where the sunshine plants an instant golden footing. The kingfisher is back again on the willow branch that overhangs the stream. Like a great glittering dewdrop, he sits in the full light of the sun, mutely watching the speeding river below him, his brilliant colours flashing, now blue, now green, now orange-red, as he turns himself curiously from side to side. These are his halcyon days, these flighting bright pauses in the debacle of autumn. South wind and a southern sun have repeopled the waters for him. Yesterday the north wind cried like a frightened child in the tree tops against a dreary leaden sky, and the river swept sullenly onward, void of all life but the ceaseless spray that drove before it under the lash of the blast. But to-day the soft austral wind has returned. The gold and the turquoise are back on the waters. The kingfisher is out again, searching his favourite pool under the trailing willow fronds. Silently he sits and scans the hurrying stream. The faintest rustle in the bushes, or crack of dry twig underfoot, and he will be off with the speed of an arrow, uttering his shrill defiant note as he flies. But as yet he has no cognisance of an enemy. The leaf-strewn waters journey on. Every clear break in the spangled tide receives his vigilant scrutiny. At last, when the eye is dazed with watching his charging brilliance, he stoops and plunges straight down like a fallen stone. In a moment his glittering armoury is gone. The clear ringing note of the plunge sends a blackbird out of the thicket behind you, screaming an alarm to all the hills. A ring of ripples forms on the water, spreads and dies away. A moment more, the gleaming emerald of the halcyon shows again. With a burst and a spatter of diamond drops, he is on the wing once more, all his bright colours gaily flaunting as he speeds back to his old station on the willow tree. You have just time to note the glittering, writhing minnow held caterways in his spear-like bill. Then with one gulp his prey is down his azure throttle. He is sitting in the sunshine again, as quietly, as alertly as ever, watching the depths for the gliding silver treasure he loves so well. Unceasingly the south wind drives its flock across the field of blue. The white cloud trellis thickens now. Swiftly coming and going, the yellow bands of sunshine spread over the glowing hills. In the track of the light the colours seem to leap and subside and break into long crests of foam, like waves on a contending sea. The tide droops lower and lower. The waters are all but hidden now, deep in their whispering wilderness of reeds. The wind in the tree tops has a wilder, freer note, and now a wandering gust drives down the open stream, and the sweetest sound in all the long year's river music, the sound of the falling acorns, strikes upon the ear. Wherever the oak woods grow to the water's edge, this peerless symphony comes with the earliest breezes of November. In the upper woods to-day hardly an acorn remains aloft in its green cup. All have long ago been flung to earth, or carried off by the black battalions from the rookery. but the riverside oaks go to their winter sleep with a more leisurely tread. The sudden flaw of wind has shaken them, passed on, and died away. And now the acorns, half loosened in their green setting, begin their serenade. One by one they fall and strike the water far and near with a deep bell-like note. At first it is a measured chime, rich and slow, filling the silence with its lingering melody. But soon the wind stirs again overhead, and the metre quickens. Now the river is like a harp with 1,000 quivering strings. Deep chords peal out on the nearest waters, and softer, deeper echoes answer far away. Bright rippling arpeggios begin on the remotest reaches, pass swiftly, tumultuously by, and fade away on the distant brink of the wood. Hardly a note is missing in the scale as the acorns fall on the resonant waters, in twos and threes, in whole scattering handfuls, at the will of the inconstant breeze. It is the last living music of the woods, this acorn song in red November. But it is a joyous song, bringing a joyous year to its golden closing. The old poets sang of melancholy autumn. One by one they go by in their velvet trunk hose, their periwigs and patches, their stocks and high-shouldered coats and silver shoe buckles, all chanting the same dirge-like antiphon of a moribund season, a sorrowful dying year. November and its hang-dog name for melancholy haunts their lines with an obsession of death-drawn figures and lugubrious phrases. But whether the times have changed, or the old poetry were a false convention, there is little of sadness in the autumn of to-day. For every leaf that falls, a new one is already in the making. The hillside copse of hazel, stripped of its last leaves now, is purple with its promise for next year's greenery. Already the chestnuts have a myriad sappy buds that glisten in the sunshine as the wind rocks their bare branches to and fro. Nothing pauses, nothing looks backward, everything changes, all but the river. Through all the swift race of growth and leaf and flower, through full maturity and red decline and russet death, until underfoot the dry leaves crackle once more, and the only music above is the whistling song of empty branches. The river keeps on its eternal way, the one immutable thing in a world that is change upon change for ever. End of chapter 6. Chapter 7 of An Idler in the Wilds by Tickner Edwardes. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. A Jay Hunt. The wind is a restless, upbraiding thing in the crest of pines upon the hill. Here in the valley, where the jays are calling deep down in the eternal woodland twilight, the frosty air is all but motionless. Overhead, the termagant northwest gale careers from hilltop to hilltop, taking the mile of lowering grey sky between in one vociferous stride. Yet in the wood below, save for the far-off clamour of the jays, a strange dull silence lingers everywhere. The only sound that breaks the stillness is the whispering echo of your footfall, as, wading ankle high in the crisp brown leaves, Each step bears you farther and farther down into the misty woodland deep. Who would track the blue jay-pie to his winter lair had need of all his forest craft and all his patience. A robber and an outlaw both by heritage and inclination, the jay views with keen distrust every human infraction of his solitude. Come as stealthily as you will, his vigilant eye is sure to mark you down. The harsh, intermittent note you have been following through the green gloom of the beech trunks changes suddenly to a deep, insistent warning, then as swiftly dies away. He is up and off through the bickering tree tops with that headlong, clumsy flight of his, yet at a pace that will bear him in a moment far out of the zone of any danger. But to day better fortune may be in store. Past disappointments have bred in you some of the jay's own wary wisdom. Instead of creeping in upon him where first his loud strident voice broke upon the ear, you have made a wide detour and entered the lee side of the wood. Moreover, this time other conditions are in your favour. The shrill note of the wind on the hilltop has masked your approach, and the clinging ground mist renders a wide survey impossible, even to the jay's far-seeing eyes. Above all, by great good chance, you have reached his favourite hunting ground well in advance of him. Here, where a few ancient oaks stand in the midst of the beechwood, with the close-set hollies crowding in between, he built his nest in earliest days of May. Crouching down in the thick cover now to wait for him, you can just make out its dark irregular bulk through the green glimmer overhead. Acorns in plenty lie hidden under the fallen leaves, and acorns are the jay's principal and often his only winter sustenance. Hither he is sure to come, sooner or later, if only your patience outvie his loitering mood. The dense holly clump, standing in the avenue between the trees, has netted the leaves as they gambolled by on past autumn winds, and heaped them up into a natural couch amidst the dry stems of brake fern. Settling comfortably down in your shadowy nook under the hollies, the minutes creep by, and the hush around you grows more profound than ever. With the cessation of your rustling footsteps, the last sound of life seems to have died away from the wood. Far above on the hilltop, the wind keeps up its sorrowful refrain. Sighing, lamenting, beseeching, threatening in turn, its shrill voice comes down to you now with a strangely human quality. Sometimes the swift air torrent overhead stoops and catches the highest branches in its flow. A sudden volley of sound breaks forth. The tree tops lash to and fro. The supple beech wands sway and tremble to their moss-clad roots. A little vortex of leaves comes eddying down into the still twilight, each twirling speck of red glowing like a kindled torch in the misty gloom as it slowly settles among its fellows long since fallen to earth. Then the wind passes. The silence comes again. The mazy patternwork of branches overhead lies against the drab sky, sharp cut and motionless as ever. Thus the minutes drag slowly by. The harsh sonorous note far down in the valley has never ceased, but as yet it has come no nearer. Listening, watching from your dim ambush, an hour has journeyed on, and you begin to fear that once more disappointment is in train for you. when suddenly the well-known cry peals out, this time startlingly close and clear. Again and again it vibrates through the dim air, and then at last you see him, swinging boldly along through the green aisles of the wood, looking, in the dull light, as red as the new cast foliage around you, and slanting to earth just as did the reluctant leaves a moment back under the stress of the domineering wind. Silently, cautiously, you keep your glance upon him. He passes, turns, and swoops downward, never stopping his rich husky monotone the while. You catch the glint of turquoise on his wings, and the ruddy glow of his whole plumage as he skims the leafy forest floor not an arm's stretch away, and up again into the dark arabesque of branches, calling incessantly as he goes. And then, rarest chance of all, for one brief moment he perches, and all his fine extravagant beauty stands revealed, quiescent against the sombre plain of lowering winter sky. To view the jay thus, himself unconscious of your presence in his native fastness, is to realise once and for all time the true spirit of wild woodland life. Persecuted more relentlessly, and, indeed, with better cause, than almost any other feathered thing, he yet preserves through it all a strength of individuality and daring unique among his kind. He has accepted long ago all the perils and the prerogatives of the situation thrust upon him. He is the frank, incorrigible brigand, every man's hand against him, all his crafty vigilance and cunning leagued against mankind. And yet Robin Hood of old never played the part of the romantic thief more gallantly than this hereditary corsair of the wood. There is nothing of the currish pilferer about his methods. Wherever he goes, he flaunts his colours undisguised, uttering his war cry boldly to hill and dale as he speeds on his errand of rapine. These are hard times for him now, when the December frost locks up the earth in its iron casket, and nothing stays above ground that can burrow into the warmth below. Acorns there are still, and berries on holly and briar, but such lean precarious diet goes ill with his luxurious temperament. In the spring, as every keeper knows to his cost, the jay takes his fill of more generous fare. You cannot acquit him of the charge of covert robbing, nor deny that he raids village gardens and orchards whenever the mood besets him. But at least he comes in broad day, sounding his battle cry from afar, and dares the danger for the prize, like the gentleman thief he knows himself to be. Almost the whole year through, the cry of the jay is heard in wood and covert, but at one short season he is strangely silent, and nothing illustrates the jay's inborn wiliness more than this. When his mate is sitting on her nest of grey-green freckled eggs up there in the crutch of the holly bough, and the old resource of flight against peril is for the moment unavailing, he assiduously holds his peace. He knows his reticence is the only chance now of safety for the coming brood, and all through this anxious time of incubation until the young are fledged, the jay and his mate go to and fro in almost utter silence. And then at last, one morning in early July, he raises again the old defiant clamour, and leads his noisy family away up into the green security of the forest heights. Watching him now, As he sits on the lichened oak branch in the fading winter light, you marvel at the restless energy and vigilance that possesses him. He is never still for a moment. Crest and tail are constantly erected. His keen glance flashes from side to side. He is for ever turning this way and that, keeping his whole environment under ceaseless scrutiny. Lie as still as you may in your shady nook, you cannot hope to escape his wariness for long. And now, as he flits down among the fallen leaves to hunt for acorns, he begins a low, monotonous, girding note. Plainly something has occurred to waken his suspicions. Suddenly he stops short in his busy scrabbling. Before you have time to realise your detection, he is gone through the maze of beech trunks, filling the wood with his harsh screaming as he flies. The deep note dies away. Your jay hunt is over, and now it is homeward through the reddening sunset light. While you have been waiting under the dense holly cover, the brief winter's afternoon has faded, and with it the complaining violence of the blast. In the fringe of pinewood on the hill, one soft low voice remains, like a faint far echo of the day's windy strife. Overhead the sky is clearing. There is a frosty glitter of stars to the eastward, where the blue darkness is hurrying over the wood top. Hardly will you gain the road to the distant village before the green and drab of the beechwood changes into the black silence of the winter night. End of chapter 7. Chapter 8 of An Idler in the Wilds by Tickner Edwardes. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. When the light is low. The peewit cries over the meadow, a wan, despairing cry, as of some famished, storm-tortured thing. And the lark bursts up from the meadow grass, up into the grey desolation of sky and the rollicking south-west wind, filling the morning with his joyous song. The weird, despondent note and the bright trilling refrain mingle together strangely in the ear. The peewit, flitting to and fro in his sad inglorious way, still hugging the lees of winter fondly to him, and the grey, speckled lark, fresh from the new sprouting green, carrying his blithe message of the year's awakening up into the sad-hued heaven, and revelling in the warm rough caress of the breeze. His is but a short song still. A sudden swoop upward, head to the blast, his feathers blown all awry as he goes, and one steady circle of music, then silence, as he drops like a falling stone down once more into the sheltering bents. But without an instant's pause, another takes up the glad refrain, and after him one more, and still another, until the merry catch-song has travelled the whole dim round of greening hillside, and the first singer is ready to take his place again in the bright interminable melody. But the peewit keeps on with his winter dirge as despairfully as ever. To and fro under the grey half-light he speeds, a restless, wearisome, solitary thing. The gloom of the sky, the resounding violence of the wind, black bare tree-tops and whistling hedgerows, he finds nothing but hopeless menace of winter everywhere. In the new ploughed land beyond the hazels, his grim conspirators in adversity are delving, a sullen, inharmonious crew. Looking through the purple maze of branches, The flock makes a darker stain on the rich deep Vandyke of the fresh turned earth. A churlish silence is over them as they work, save when one rises and wanders to a new station farther afield, rending the shrill blast with his shriller calling. But a shout or a clap of the hand will start the whole mute brotherhood into clamorous flight. Rising with one accord, they sweep upward, showing intensely black against the hurrying grey of the sky. As they pass over against the distant line of elmwood, their white underplumage glows out like 100 twinkling eyes. But the wind buffets them too mercilessly. Soon they settle once more into their old haven of brown furrows. The wild keening dies down again into the single, oft reiterated note. On these days of never-ending gloom, when the south-west wind, warm and blusterous, drives by the whole day long with all its sombre cloud sail set, when the night never really forsakes the wood, and midday in the open fields is but a lesser twilight, the eye unconsciously seizes and dwells upon every speck of colour that may serve to leaven the universal grey. While the sun shone in the clear frost-bound weather, the glance was surfeited with brilliant hues. The rainbow sparkle of the hoarfrost, green and gold of shimmering far-off woodlands, the measureless, formless azure overhead. But to-day these conditions are sharply overthrown. It is as if the warm south-west gale had blotted out every vestige of colour from sky and trees alike. To look upward now is to grow giddy with the ceaseless race of cloud forms streaming by overhead. Moving towers of darkness tumbling and swaying onward, each more ominously black than its fellows. The fringe of oak that borders the meadow not 100 paces off has lost its bright garniture of moss and lichen, and shows against the sky like a filigree of jet. The distant woods are lairs of impenetrable gloom where the night still slumbers. It is as though the deep-voiced minatory gale were charged to the zenith with some swart pigment, changing everything it touched into its own Cimmerian hue. Looking out through the hazels, upward and onward at all this cheerless monotone, the shrill cry of the peewit seems to focus the desolation. It is the black sky and blacker woodlands translated into wailing, drear-voiced sound. But now the lark is up again in the joyless heaven with a merrier peal than ever. The sudden burst of song is almost startling in its apparent incongruity, until the glance, tired of the scurrying chaos overhead that is always changing, yet unendingly the same, drops to earth when the brief rippling melody falls and fails. And then the secret of the day is suddenly revealed to you. It is all a study in contrasts. The sad song and the glad song, the restless wrath of the sky, and the warm-winged, urging gale, instinct with its vivid growth and life, the sombre masses of woodland, and the fair green coverlid of sprouting corn laid over the hill. Purged of its old gross feeling for colour by long gazing upward, as the subtle painter of the seasons willed it should, the eye comes down to the rich quiet shades of the earth itself as to a bridal feast. It is all one to the melancholy plover when the roof of the world is dark and the black wind cries over the land. He sees only present calamity of gloom. But the lark looks out into bright futurity. Now at last you learn why he was so merry in the face of seeming adversity. In the lowly furrow where he shelters between his blithe volleys of music, all is aglow with dim quiet colour, teeming with the young year's rich renewal of life. New grass fills the old dry tussocks with its tender sheen. Between the weather-worn clods of the fallow, blue veronica is springing. Rosy tufts of dead nettle hide beneath every ridge. Under the sheltering hazels, a thousand shapes of green growth are forcing upward through the dead leaves. And here and there, in the mazy purple, the first frail catkins have let down their ladders of gold-green light. A little way onward, and the grey gloom that the peewit loves blots out all colour again. Yet the very spirit of spring breathes in the lark's aerial music, abating the joylessness of the heaven, just as winter stars bring their own triumphant compensation for the pale, death-like stillness of the night. Through the singing, surging labyrinth of hazels the footpath winds. Over the hillocky ploughland where the peewits scatter before you, crying weirdly as they go, and down the slope of the hill. Overhead the sky seems more threateningly black than ever, and now, underfoot, there is nothing but the dun hues of the fresh-turned earth itself. Working intricately together the whole year through, nature and the husbandman rarely leave a corner of the fields untenanted by some form of beauty. But on these first days following the plough, a real desolation seems to have come over everything. On all the broad descending sweep of hillside, until it dips abruptly and vanishes into the misty coombe below, not a green blade, not a single blossom of pimpernel or yellow charlock remains. The ruthless ploughshare has buried all alike deep under the sod. Hungrily the eye searches the callow waste for any token of colour. In earth and sky there is nothing now but dreary monotone. The bare brown soil underfoot, and above, the whistling wan voice of the hurricane, with its great dark masses of rain cloud driving before it, for ever changing in shape and volume as they go. Yet on these dim resounding January days the unlovely spirit of the ploughlands often has one lurid counterpoise. The path winds over the last sharp undulation of brown furrows, and down into the coombe. Suddenly the whole scene changes. The drab, bare soil is here still, and the owlet light a deeper grey than ever. But the old magic touch of contrast is back again in the picture. Once more colour and joyous sound and quick tense movement wanton together everywhere. A dozen fires are gleaming in the vast expanse of the field, each with its long blue riband of smoke stretching away like molten turquoise on the gale. Jingling harrows hurry to and fro with their merry labour note. A score of men and women are at work, busily raking the dry weeds together and piling them breast high upon the crackling flames. One of the weed burners, young and sturdy, tending the biggest fire of all, is singing an old Sussex farming song. To plough and to sow and to reap and to mow and be a farmer's boy, ahoy, and be a farmer's boy. The words of the song, lustily trolled forth in the rich, quaint southern dialect, have a strange familiar ring about them, a reckless mirth and jollity, curiously out of keeping with the desolate day, and yet full of some reminiscence only half defined. Drawing near to watch the leaping, gambolling flames, rose red and vivid amber whirling incessantly upward, and the merry crimson sparks streaming away on the berserk wind, all becomes suddenly clear to you. It is another, and this time a human singer, but the spirit, the motive, of the song is the same as in the one you heard up there on the fallow, when the lark swept up from his bower of blue veronica, hurling his blithe prophetic music in the teeth of the winter blast. End of chapter 8. Chapter 9. Of an Idler in the Wilds, by Tickner Edwardes. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The February Summer. Old-time chroniclers of nature, and many of the latter-day panegyrists of the Mary Howitt school, have familiarised us with at least one delusive metaphor in regard to the change of the seasons. The life of the year is pictured to us as a tide, gradually attaining its apogee of growth and colour and music at midsummer, and as gradually declining to ultimate desolation in winter's fell conspiracy of frost and storm. But the true country dweller, student of the open air, living his life through day by day at the great authentic heart of things, has long cast aside a figure which he knows to be as trite as it is fallacious. It is true that nature never cools her crucible. She is for ever secretly preparing, steadily harking forward to changes as yet little evident superficially, but the actual transformation from one season to another is instant, the work of one brief day, often of a single hour. With the first frost of late September, summer changes into autumn at a stroke. One night of the northern blast, after long still weeks of flaming autumn weather, and every branch is bare in wood and hedgerow, the hilltop white against a drab careering sky, a rimy cerecloth shrouding everything. At one stride, winter has trodden out the last bright vestige of the dying year under its ruthless solarette of steel, and spring makes its first breach in the icy winter ramparts with the same abrupt inconsequence. 4 weeks the frost has held, still, breathless weeks, when all the brooks are silent, every sound of husbandry gone from the deserted fields, and strange, shy, hunger-driven birds forsake their immemorial solitudes, and haunt the village homesteads, disputing with the starlings and the sparrows for a crust. Days of impotent sunshine, level and low and colourless, with the stealthy gold of evening but a moment's herald of the dark, and long nights when a real death-like silence lowers over vale and upland, and the very stars seem frozen solidly into the black canopy of the sky. And then there comes a day in February when it is suddenly borne in upon you that the pitiless iron-bound season has reached its close at last. The air is seemingly as cold and still as ever, though the blue-grey sky and pallid sunshine are gone. Now a white mist hovers everywhere, slowly gathering on twig and branch and stem until all is hidden under the same wraith-like mystery. But through the phantom air a peal of merry thrush music rings out incessantly far and wide. Little red-brown wrens are scudding in the dim hedgerow, stopping now and then to pour out their slender silver song. Robins unseen mark the shadowy thornbrakes with sudden trills and cadences, glad or woeful, just as the changing mood besets them. High above, a cawing and dawing goes by invisibly, faint at first, now waxing loud and clamorous, then fading away once more as the rooks sweep onward to the distant upland. For a moment a cloud of finches darkens the mist about your head. The sound of their wings is muffled thunder, their twittering babel drowning every other note. Just for an instant they are here, and then, like the deep organ music of the rooks, their jingling chorus fails. They are gone into the white wonder of the morning, and far and near the thrush's song breaks out again, more joyously, more insistently than ever. And now, high above in the invisible wood top, there comes a strange new note, so soft that the ear can hardly detect it, and yet indescribably sweet and pure. Like an Aeolian harp, it sounds once, twice, it dies away, then is back again, this time with an import not to be confounded. Poets old and new have sung to us of the voice of spring, and we have accepted the idea as a pretty motive for rhyming, or at least are willing to mete out to it, indulgence due to an old acquaintanceship. But here, in sober earnest, is the very thing. The most prosaic could attach no other name to this rich, jubilant sound of the young west wind, alive once more in the tree tops after the long enduring reign of the frost. And with the glad new voice, a stir comes in the heart of everything. A sudden breath fans warm upon the cheek. With every moment the breeze overhead freshens and quickens. The dense mist grows lighter, and you begin to see that it was no deep ocean of white, but only the merest coverlet spread low upon the earth. Above, all the time, there was the blue sky and the clear untrammelled light of the young spring day. Faster and faster the mist dissolves. Loosened by the first strong sunbeams, the hoar-frost begins to fall from the tops of the trees in tinkling gusts of sound. The mist rolls away over the wood-top. Now the sunshine breaks through in shafts of rich hot amber. Underfoot the frost melts everywhere. The grass by the wayside flashes gold and turquoise and crimson, as the pale rime melts into iridescent glitter of dew. Hard by, the brook is singing its old carol of the year's awakening. It is as though, riding the warm Avonian breeze, spring has leapt a whole continent in a single hour. Her glad laugh ripples now through every covert, where but yesternight winter lay gripping the earth as with the grip of dead hands never to be loosed. An old reflection, and no doubt a true one, on much of the writings of the so-called poet-naturalists towards the end of the 19th century, was that they were too much given over to a kind of emotional exaggeration, labelled by one keen yet kindly mentor as purple patching. The phrase went round the coteries of the time, did its work for a space, then disappeared for ever beyond the journalistic horizon. But the half-truth it stood for remains today. With certain natures, long sojourning amidst the wildlife of field and woodland has an almost intoxicating influence. Literary judgment, the sense of proportion, management of rhythm and refrain, even the very meaning of the words themselves become confused and lost, and all the reader gets is a crazed kaleidoscopic view of broken bits of colour, a jumble of sounds, each in itself potential of music, but collectively of no more worth than the crackle of thorns aflare under the pot. The truth is that to a nature lover, who would be writer as well, a sure integrity, a rigid reserve of language is an absolutely vital thing. In nothing is the limitation of his material brought so fairly home to him as when a craftsman in words sets about the task of bringing the rich radiance of a summer's day, or the still harmony of a starry night in springtime, within the limits of a printed page. Loaded line after line of detail, cataloguing, as the old Jeffreyian critics called it, will give a sense only of oppression and bewildering complexity. The pageant of a June morning is all buoyant loveliness, blossom and song and glad green leaves afloat on a river of light. The starlit nights of April are pure tranquillity done in silver point. The heavy touch of the detailist is as disturbing here as taurine invasion of a china store. And panegyric, bolting towards the upper skies with the bright bit between its teeth, leads only where few may follow. The pace is too swift and arduous. A floundering fathom or two, and the guide is lost to sight in the pathless azure. Mere earthly pinions cannot outstay so unreasonably celestial a flight. The words coruscate and glow upon the page, but colour clashes with colour, and sound with sound. Their very prodigality defeats the writer's intention, and what was proposed as a munificent gift ends as a scanty dole of which penury itself might be ashamed. And yet, if any picture is to be given of these first virgin hours of English springtime, the February summer, as Richard Jefferies loved to call it, words, and words alone, must avail. 100 canvases would not be enough to show all the rousing beauty of this one myriad faceted day. The mist is gone from the woodland, all but a tender violet haze that yet dwells lingeringly in the deeper shadows. Out in the clearing, on the southern slope of the hill, the morning sun has already a power and warmth that sends the blood tingling merrily through the veins. Everywhere the soft breeze harps in the thicket with a note that is sheer light-hearted gaiety. The air above is full of a dim, wandering, wayward music, just as if each sunbeam were singing as it fell. Underfoot, in the new green growth of February, the vanguard of the year's blossom shows bravely through the sheltering bents. Pale sulphur of the earliest primroses, tiny purple banners of violet, bold bright eyes of celandine flashing under every alder stem. Here and there the coltsfoot rears a sheaf of golden tassels, and a few of the more adventurous of the hive bees are out in the hazels, dallying with the pale green catkins that slant all one way upon the breeze. Down in the water meadows the cattle are basking in the generous light, just as if summer were really upon them. The river beyond has its old bright summer breadth of mirrored sunbeams, where now and again the little coot, half swimming, half flying, cuts a dark trace over the water, and a kingfisher gleams like a star of blue-green tinsel as he basks on the stump of osier deep in the grey reed stems. It was all here yesterday, hidden under the dour rime curtain of those last strenuous winter days. Only the touch of warm west wind was lacking, and now, though frost and snow may return for a little space, spring has made his first real foothold sure, ere he girds up to overrun the world. End of chapter 9. Chapter 10 of An Idler in the Wilds by Tickner Edwardes. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The Black Republic. Under the lee of the elmwood the old farmhouse stands, its latticed windows afire in the rose-red glory of the lifting sun. For many a long day past the north-west gale has thundered in the tree-tops, but now, under cover of the darkness, the chill, unruly wind has gone. March has come in like the proverbial lamb. In pure gold the dim-eyed morning breaks through the trellis of purple cloud, and the voice of the wind in the towering elm grove has given place to the busy clamour of the nesting rooks. Perhaps it is this sudden, well-nigh mysterious, return of the rooks in springtime to their old ancestral breeding place that marks, more than anything else, the progress of the year. Ever since June, the rookery has been deserted. Now and again a solitary bird could be seen taking a swift survey, in passing, of the abandoned homesteads, and in November a few of the black wicker cradles were furbished up and stanchioned against the coming winter blasts. But until yesterday, when February went out with its surging tumult of wind, the rookery was given over to the starlings, and the sooty army still kept far afield, searching the new-turned furrows, or making common cause with the jackdaws down on the riverside flats. Then came at last sunset's failing breeze, and a windless gloaming. Darkness brimming planet high with a new strange silence. Warm wandering airs filling the deepest hour before the dawn. And then, with the first grey tinge of morning, a sudden babel of voices overhead. Daybreak revealed the airy city, populous as ever. Each nest, a dark blotch against the paling sky, had its clangorous pair about it. Dusky wings were cleaving the twilight everywhere. The summer life of the rookery had begun, as it nearly always does, with the first still, sunny hour of March. If a human parallel may be found in the lives of most wild creatures of the countryside, in nothing is this more evident than in the social life of the rook. It is true, he concerns himself with none of the more picturesque attributes, nor the subtler graces of humankind. For these we must seek elsewhere in the world of feathered things. The Skylark has his prototype among musical humanity, in that he loves to sing his pure song in the farthermost skies, but lives his daily life through, willingly enough, amidst the lowliest clods. The ringing laugh of the woodpecker is blatant human cynicism impersonified. The thrush stands for invincible light-heartedness, the dogged optimism that holds up its brave foolish face against all adversity's rebuffs. The nightingale is worldly grief's melodious advocate. Every note tells of a cherishing of sorrow and overweening vanity in pain. But the rook contemns all fine foibles and empty unproductive sentiment. He will have nothing but the obvious verities of life. A grim and colour-fast utilitarianism rules his every act. He has indeed an old and undeserved repute for sociability, in that he often builds his airy castle nigh to human settlements. But this is out of no respect or confidence in the selected neighbour. The rook knows that other and more active enemies of his shun the vicinage of man, and he deliberately makes choice of the lesser evil. Man he trusts not a jot more than any other living thing. He keeps all alike at strategic distance. It is as if he had measured out a gunshot's length on every side of his aerial dwelling, and any encroachment within this necromantic circle is followed at once by the whole colony's precipitate flight. And yet, as an understudy of a certain type of human nature, the rook may be said to fulfil the conditions more nearly than any other bird. His main personal characteristic would appear to be a crafty timorousness, discretion brought by heredity almost to the fine point of cowardice. For the rest, as an individual, he seems to be chiefly made up of worldly wisdom, anxious foresight, much love of bodily security, and intellectual selfishness, all developed to a sharp focus through unnumbered generations. For all these qualities influence his daily life, and are at the bottom of his conduct consistently throughout his triple duty to himself, his mate, and his fellows. The marital life of each pair of rooks forms a curious study in domestic compromise. For more than 8 months in the year the partners lead an indifferent, perhaps an entirely separate existence. And then, with the first calm days of March, comes this annual honeymooning, carefully timed for the heyday of the year. 3 months of domestic joy and care spent high up in the swaying elm tops, when they seem to develop suddenly a whole new sheaf of parental and lover-like attributes. The repair of the old nest or the building of a new one, and its preparation for the coming brood, is an absorbing mutual anxiety. All through this time, and the period of incubation following, the rook assiduously feeds his mate. He waits upon her with unwearying attention, and on rare occasions will even take his turn upon the eggs, while she stretches her wings a little, flapping about ponderously in the neighbouring branches, the pair keeping up a running fire of comment on the affairs of the rookery in general, in that rich, deep language of which we can only gather the merest inkling now and then. But it is in the corporate life of the rookery that the observer's interest must chiefly centre. The spirit of a medieval stronghold permeates it through and through, linked, nevertheless, with a genuine modern republican feeling. How nice a balance has been struck between individual and collective polity in these black republics of the tree tops, will probably never be fully ascertained. Most lover students of nature are willing to admit the finite quality in all human observation and deduction of this kind. The drawn curtain and the closed door oppose them at every turn of the difficult way. But that system and order, tried and proved through countless ages, are at the base of many apparently unaccountable things in rook government is at least certain. Watching a colony of rooks, by means of a powerful glass, on any fine still day in early springtime, many curious traits in their communal life are soon revealed. Though a complete general understanding of what is needful for the common good can be at once detected, it is also soon evident that each pair is deeply imbued with an only half concealed distrust of its fellows. A polite fiction of mutual confidence is indeed maintained by all, but there is an equally obvious determination on the part of each couple never to run the risk of possible dishonesty in its neighbours. The half-built nest is never left unguarded. One of the partners invariably remains on the watch while the other is absent foraging for sticks. Just as there is always a black sheep in every fold, there seems to be in most rookeries one of the swart brotherhood whose blackness goes all the way through. Sometimes, in the midst of the busy cawing and bustle of the day, a sudden hubbub will arise. Round one of the nests a fierce conflict is waging. Half a dozen birds have launched themselves upon it, rending it to fragments and casting it like chaff to the ground, while others are chasing off the luckless proprietors, following them through the blue air with a sound not wholly unlike that of a pack of hounds in full cry. It is difficult to make sure of the motive for this determined eviction, but in all likelihood a pilferer from other nests has been caught at his work, and destruction of his own home and banishment from the colony is the ordained penalty for the offence. Sometimes a solitary rook may be seen flying from treetop to treetop, taking a frantic interest in the work of the others, yet invariably met at all points by rude repulse and buffetings. This is the odd bird in the rookery. A great disgrace is upon him, the disgrace of bachelorhood, and there will be no peace for himself, nor good repute with his neighbours, until by some means or other his matrimonial shortcomings have been made good. At last, in some mysterious way, perhaps by mating with a widow rook from another colony, he gets him a wife, and the new pair settle down to nest building, often in a tree far removed from the rest. An interesting point in all nature study, and never more interesting than when the rook is under debate, is in what degree the songs and call notes of birds constitute a language, a real medium of communication, not only between each songster and his mate, but throughout the general commonwealth of wings. When the rooks are delving in the furrows on land set about by dense hedgerows, a sentinel is always posted in one of the neighbouring trees, and there is no mistaking the import of the cry by which he warns his people below of the approach of any enemy. "Look out!" The word shouted lustily across a field would almost exactly reproduce the loud raucous note that sets the whole company at once in full retreat. And when, flying away from the gun, a long straggling line of rooks stretches by overhead, there is no doubt of the meaning of the quick, harsh desultory sounds that break from the hurrying throng. Anger, mutual congratulation at escape, a fine disgust at the interruption of their raid on the growing corn, each quality is easily distinguishable in the general chorus. But, lying out here in the shelter of the hedgerow on any soft sunny March morning, when your presence is unknown or disregarded, and the busy life of the rookery is going forward without suspicion or alloy, it is not so easy to isolate expression among the thousand varied notes that go to make up the rich laborious cadence overhead. Perhaps there is nothing in nature so supremely soothing and restful as the harmonious uproar of the nesting rooks. March brings with it another sound, the voice from the lambing pens, almost as sweet and as full of the promise of spring. But this has none of the deep, forceful murmur of the rookery. It is a plaint, a lamentation. Night and day the pathos of it rends the air, sobering the gladness of the sunshine, and lifting its protest against the bright serenity of the moonlit night. But there is no weak, pooling quality in this tree-top music of the rook. Life as he knows it is often hard, often relentlessly cruel, but he takes bitter and sweet with the same egotistic philosophy. When the wind blows with hurricane strength, and in an hour undoes the work of many days, he goes about the task again with a fine imperturbability. Warmth and sunshine, and the lazy clouds creeping over the windless blue, mean for him labour without enthusiasm. And darkness with the rook is but another name for rest and dreamless sleep. While the lambing yard below makes the small hours vociferous with its eternal yammering and calling, the quietest place in the countryside is the populous rook city, set in its garden of elm blossom, and hung midway between earth and the glittering star-strewn night. End of chapter 10. Chapter 11 of An Idler in the Wilds by Tickner Edwardes. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. April's Festival. When March is done, and the first sun-bright April morning glitters over budding woodland and daisy-spangled field, often a curious feeling of discontent, an ill-defined impatience, asserts itself amid all the gladness and exultant life of the young spring day. Standing here on the ancient rustic footbridge spanning the stream just where it emerges from the wood, and watching the bright water rippling through the flowery meadow, this old sensation of shortcoming, of something wanting in the fullness of the radiant season, seems to strike home to the heart as it has never done before. Knee-deep, the brimming tide of April blossom rises all around you. The tall buttercups cling together by the wayside until there seems hardly room for one more golden bell. The daisies spread beyond, a vast unbroken sheet of silver, with the nodding ladies' smocks, making a rosy mist of beauty over all. Everywhere the hedgerows are full of fresh green spray. In the wood behind, the primroses crowd down to the water's edge, where the elders trail their new tresses in its gentle flow. But the forest trees still lack fulfilment of the universal promise. Though the tree tops overhead are thick with a myriad bursting buds, hardly the faintest tinge of summer verdure shows against the blue. The old storm-fretted greys and russets still prevail, and the sunlight thrusts its yellow fingers into every secret nook and woodland hollow, just as it did in wintry days gone by. And it is just now, when April is no more a dim and far-away ideal, but a living, tangible reality, that this impatient longing, the longing for green leaves, comes to you with redoubled force. Day by day and week by week you have watched the year grow out of the frosty silence of December, through January's penurious hours and the ever-quickening time that followed, until at last the first gold stars of celandine shone by the pathside, and the elms stood out in great cliffs of purple blossom against the cloud-dappled blue of early March. And this one thought grew unchecked upon the mind, the thought that April would bring an all-sufficing fullness and perfection, a high-running sea of colour to every field and forest clearing, to the air 1,000 new strains of music, to the woods the old dancing frolic of green shadows over fallen leaves below. But April has come, and the splendour of the year still hugs close to the warm protecting soil. The tree tops, thick and full of budding promise, are yet only dark intersections against the azure. All the gay profusion of sunshine and rich abandon of colour beneath will not atone for the bare tree stems and unladen branches, though they sing like Orphean lute strings all day long in the sweet hot wind. April, long awaited, has come at last, but the summer canopy of green foliage seems as remote as ever, infinite leagues away under the white cloud country of the glistening southern sky. But this old obsession of impatience, inveterate as it is unreasoning, owes its existence to the fact that it takes account of only half a truth. Spring paints her picture over the sober greys and drabs of winter in minute, scarce discernible touches, but summer works with a large impressionist brush. Spring is the true year dawn, a sure yet deliberate fashioning of a new temple of the world, built out of fallen sunbeams, tier above tier, until young April crowns the topmost pinnacle with its joyous shimmering light. In the first virgin hours of English April, a lull seems indeed to come in the tumultuous march of things. It is as if the young season tarried in the shining gala way of the world, reluctant, lingering, though decked and ready as for the bridal feast. But this rich hiatus in the throng of growth and life endures but for a little space. A day comes when the whole spirit of the countryside is swiftly and wonderfully changed. The sun burns with an unwonted vigour out of the cloudless blue. Hill and dale seem to throb with a new awakened energy. The stir of the west wind in the tree tops dies down to the softest, drowsiest murmur, that creeps in the ear like a sea-shell's song. And over all the green alleys of the earth a passion of strange new music spreads. Summer comes at last as with the sudden breaking down of barriers, and to stand here now on the ancient footbridge by the wood, watching the new impetuous course of things, is to be shamed at once out of all past niggard discontents. It is all like a rushing, overwhelming torrent now. Every moment a fresh voice comes to the song-laden morning, Every moment the shadows seem to deepen in the wood behind, as the leaves unfurl their myriad banners to the urging light. Sweet and low in the greening woodtop sounds the croon of the wind. Lower, sweeter still the song of the brook beneath, as it threads its way through the last dim arches of hazel, and out into the sunny calm of meadowland beyond. Great tangles of marsh marigold line the bank on either side. A white drift of crowsfoot clogs the channel here and there, and the hurrying water breaks it into glittering deltas where the honey bees come down to drink. Making a rich deep undertone for the merry bird voices of the wood, this sound of the bees is everywhere about you, a sound like an invisible river of rejoicing overhead. Thousands upon thousands passing swiftly, steadily, out and home, passing so swiftly that the eye may never see the flash of one crystal wing in a whole hour's gazing, yet charging the already overburdened air with more music, gilding the refined song gold of the morning with their glad superfluous note. All the old familiar sights and sounds of springtime are here still, yet transfigured into summer depth and fullness. Strong and clear from the distant thicket comes the blackbird's song, but it is no longer a furtive trying over of some of the briefest of his fine adagios and mellow phrases. The old ripe leisurely chant of summer comes to you unabated now through the dazzling mirage of the April day. At every link in the snowy chain of blackthorn garlanding the meadow, thrushes pour out their freest, wildest melody. Little ox eyes fill the wood behind with whinnying silver strains. Deep in the thick daisy jungle of the mowing grass, starlings utter their high, insistent, domineering note unseen, save when one thrusts his crimson snake-like head for a moment through the white tilt of blossom, or slants jubilantly away in the sunlight towards the shadowy fastness of the wood. And one by one, as you wait on the crazy moss-grown bridge, the migrant minstrels from overseas take up their long-abandoned parts in the summer symphony. First the little willow wren softly tinkling her peal of chariot bells high up in the topmost branches, and then the wryneck, the cuckoo's mate, hillooing from his mazy perch halfway up the elm trunk, a strange penetrating note with a vehement uncanny brightness unlike any other sound in all the countryside. The long hailing cry echoes up the valley and dies away in blue distance as the bird pursues his restless flight. But the sound has awakened old, long dormant memories. The first green leaves of April and the wryneck's note, and then the cuckoo himself, the old order never changes. And now, day by day, you will listen until the rich, quiet seesaw melody is borne upon the breeze out of the farthermost azure, and, hard upon the heels of his vociferous mate, the cuckoo has come to wanton through his English holiday. But the sweetest sound in April's glittering festival of song and sunshine is the lovelorn plaint of the nightingale. Here, by the brook, an old hawthorn stands, its gnarled roots jutting out into the stream below, centuries of twisted, weather-beaten growth above, lifting its mantle of new verdure into the tremulous sultry air. And to this green watchtower, season after season, the first nightingale is sure to come. You will never witness the hour of his returning. No one has ever seen the nightingale come or go. all you can be certain of is this, that yesterday he was not, but to-day his soft lingering cadence fills the old thorn bush. And while his matchless voice wells out upon the sunlight, all other voices of the morning seem for the moment overpowered. If you would hear the nightingale's true song as the ages know it, you must look for him in some such wild deserted haunt as this. The village pensioner bird, trilling in the hedgerow for his supper, will give you only a disjointed clockwork strain. You must wait for him here by his ancestral halting place to catch his true authentic music unawares. As you listen, under the green twilight of the hazels, his first low indolent note drifts out upon the air. It is like the tuning up of some priceless cithara, the strings just moved with the lightest touch of a master's hand. Then he gives you a quick, bright chord or two, struck at random here and there in the sylvan scale, and then the deep pondering note once more, sad and slow, repeated over and over again. A moment more, and he is in the thick of his pell-mell music. It is the whole blithe pageant of the springtime translated into song. Living blue sky and dancing sunbeams, and all the sweet largesse of April blossom given over again in rippling, joyous sound. End of chapter 11. Chapter 12 of An Idler in the Wilds by Tickner Edwardes. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. A Forgotten Eden. Often the most beautiful things in nature are nature's reclamations from man. This old chalk quarry on the river's brink has long ago heard the last ringing blow of the pickaxe, the last dull roar and crackling thunder of the blasting charge. Half a century of disuse has given it back to the valerian and the wild clematis. Each year of sunshine has raised the flood mark of green growth higher and higher up the grisly face of the cliff. It is always in these sheltered solitudes that spring wins her first bright way in the universe. Out on the upland, through all the callow months of the year, it is even give and take between the sun and the keen north wind. And March is almost done before the issue of the conflict is decided. But here, in the tranquil haven of the old quarry, one clear week of sunny weather, and the year's fresh gold of celandine is springing in the grass. The coltsfoot showers its bright mintage from every crevice. Red Archangel has gotten its banquet ready for the first intrepid humble-bee. The north wind can do no more than rumble in the larches where they fringe the blue sky far overhead, or beat back the yelping company of jackdaws as it lifts 1,000 strong into the sheer air and away on some mysterious enterprise needing the whole force of the sooty battalion. But it is in the rich lush season of May that these deserted human outworks take on their chiefest glory. Then John the Baptist April has done his crying in the wilderness. Hope has his guerdon of green leaves, and promise her fulfilment of blossom. In the old chalk quarry, summer seems to have reared his garner house, where, with abounding treasure of light and song and colour, he makes ready to overflow the outer world. Coming suddenly into the great grey semicircle from the path by the riverside, The old chalk pit seems to lie deep in an immemorial silence. The jackdaws have streamed off on their usual morning errand. Their shrill clamour has died away. There is nothing of it now but a faint distant note haunting the tremulous sunshine far out on the river plain. Round the foot of the perpendicular cliff a white mist of chervil hovers. Green ivy shores it up dizzily. Wherever a root can get finger hold on ledge or in cranny, rich streaks of colour marble the towering rugged waste. At first there seems only a great silence everywhere. A rabbit, watching you from her burrow high up in the face of the cliff, stamps her hind feet sharply now and again to warn the unseen colony behind her, and the noise comes down to you like the intermittent roll of a drum. In the may blossom the bees keep up their tender undertone. There is no other sound in all the wide expanse. So wild is the place that your mere coming has put an end to all the music. You must wait here in the shadow of the thorn tree until the clatter of your boots has been forgotten, and the musicians have found their cue again in the interrupted symphony. At length, by little and little, the silence fails and ebbs away. A wren trills a bar or two, all on one stop of her slender silver whistle. Hard by, a thrush goes on with her weft of bright melody just where she broke it off to spy at you from the top of the sycamore tree. Chaffinches clink their castanets. A chiff-chaff loops after his mate, piecing his odds and ends of music together as he flies. Rich and low the wood pigeons take up the crooning burden of their love song. Life in the deserted quarry moves on again in the old primeval, hasteless, joyous way. This is the making place of summer dreams. Lying here on the soft grass in the shadow of the thorn tree, and listening to the wayward note of the bees in the may bloom overhead, every voice of the countryside seems to echo through the still air, yet with a slower, sweeter cadence than any you have known before. Even the river, gliding by the old quarry deep in its thicket of reeds, seems wholly different here from the swirling highway of waters you knew in the town. There, as it threaded the eyes of the twin bridges, the old brick viaduct with its decorous draping of moss and amber wallflowers, and the new bridge straddling its naked grey ironmongery unashamed in the stare of the town, the river went by with a busy assumption of importance, as it took the great timber-laden ketches to their moorings, or drove the solemn barges one by one like sheep into the glittering fold of the canal. But here, by the old quarry, nature has won back even the inconstant river from its busy human impost, and the waters seem to glide past on stealthy tiptoe, hushing their noisy turbulence, stilling their chattering tongue. And nowhere else shall you find such blackbird music as here in this old forgotten Eden, far from the track of men. The throstle loves the wayside copse or the hedgerow where the well-worn path winds through the meadow green. He sings the better for itinerant human company, choosing the loftiest, most conspicuous branch, and giving the casual passer-by ungrudging melodious measure as he sits with his speckled breast turned to the full light of day. But the blackbird's song is for the wild woodland and unbroken solitudes such as these. Yet even here he sings discreetly under cover, lurking deep in the green leaf twilight, and ready to cut short his rich leisurely chant at sound of the lightest step. Shyest of all shy birds, his is the last note of all to rejoin the symphony so harshly interrupted. But now he has begun again, over there where the wild cherry trees whiten the sunny steep, and his ripe, deliberate melody compels attention as no other song has power to do. For the blackbird brings into his music a quality almost unique among the songsters of the English woods and hedgerows. To say that there is evidence of conscious individual art in his performance would be to adventure upon an infinitely debatable theme. But, at least, sitting here in the cool shade of the hawthorn and listening to his mellow flute-like strains, you will find it more than difficult to set them down as mere chants, unreasoned melody. The thrush sings always at the full power of his clarion throttle. He is all for needless repetition. He must have each of his blithe rippling stanzas over and over again, and with too monotonous a cheerfulness. But you may listen to the blackbird's song the whole May morning through, and never hear a single phrase reiterated in its exact original form. The blackbird is ever for ceaseless change in rhythm, time, and quality. He sings now fast, not slow. Now he gives you a whole page of recitative full of telling pauses and grand chiming periods, and sudden coruscations of silver sound. And now his voice sinks into its lowest, softest register, and the complex technique changes to pure, quiet, simple tunefulness, plain and unadorned. And he never brings any phase of his performance to too obvious a finale. The song ends as it begins. It is taken up like a half-told tale. The story has its sweet sway with the musician for a while. The next eloquent pause may be broken by something conceived in quite a different spirit. Or, with jingling, mocking peal of strident sound, as from a lute cast roughly, reverberantly to earth, the singer may plunge away into the distant covert, to be heard no more, until the ruddy light of evening summons all the woodland choir for the last sunset symphony. Down by the river bank, the gaunt timbers of what was once a landing stage still rear their skeleton fingers, weed-grown, out of the glistening tide. And hard by, the quarry watchman must have made his home. A ruined cottage stands there in a little garden, yet scarce recognisable as human handiwork, so completely has nature done her task of reclamation. The sagging roof tree still holds up bravely, but the old thatch is fast subsiding under its weight of feather moss and grey gold lichen. From afar nothing can be made out but a denser, wilder labyrinth of greenery, and over all a drift of alien blossom, flushing red in the breathless light of noon. But drawing nearer, this unwonted colour reveals itself as a maze of old neglected apple trees, free of the pruning knife for half a century, and hovering above the little desert homestead like a belated cloud of rosy summer dawn. You cannot pass the garden gate. The ivy binds it firmly to its posts. But beyond you can see a tangle of bright weeds mingling its vagabond beauty with the colour of the rioting garden things. The honeysuckle over the door porch, grown into an impassable barrier of fragrance; the old apple boughs thrusting their pink rosetted tentacles through every gap in the crumbling wall. But it is all going back to Mother Earth again, like everything else in the abandoned quarry, tree and shrub and garden flower to their original fashioning, the very stones of the footway to their old predestined station under the sod. End of chapter 12. End of An Idler in the Wilds by Tickner Edwardes.